The best networkers don't do this and what to do instead. I'm Greg. I'm the introverted networker. And in this episode, I'm talking about networking the right way. A lot of people have this misconception. They think networking is about collecting business cards or making connections when you need something or just sending generic connect messages on LinkedIn. But the best networkers don't do that. In fact, if you've ever felt like networking is awkward or exhausting, it's probably because you've been on the other end of these bad habits that other people have when it comes to networking. And because of that, you don't really want to network because you don't want to do those things. So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to break down 3 things great networkers never do and what to do instead. So number 1 is great networkers don't wait until they need something. And you've probably all been on the other end of this before. You have somebody from your past. It's a colleague, a coworker, a classmate, maybe a boss, somebody who you haven't talked to in years. And all of a sudden they reach out to you and they want you to give them a referral to somebody. They say something like, hey, I know you're connected with so-and-so on LinkedIn. Can you introduce me? They want you to do them a favor. Maybe they say, hey, have you heard of any jobs that I would be good for? And it kind of feels bad, right? I mean, you're like stuck because you know this person and you really want to help them, but you haven't talked to them in years. And all of a sudden they show up and they haven't talked to you. They haven't asked for anything, or they haven't, asked you about yourself. They haven't done anything. They just waited till they needed something. And all of a sudden they show up and they expect you're going to help them. And you want to help them. But again, you feel bad about it because you're like, I haven't talked to this person in years. I don't even know what they're doing. I don't even know what experience they have. Like if I was going to try to refer them, it would be difficult. So like I said, we've all been on the other end of this. And when you're networking, you just need to think about, I don't want to be putting people in that same position. I don't want to put people in a position that I don't like. And I don't like people reaching out to me if I haven't talked to them in a long time and all of a sudden asking me something. So I'm not going to do that myself. And so great networkers build relationships consistently, not just when they need help. This can be hard, okay? Because I understand networking isn't something a lot of people think I'm going to do this all the time. If you're listening to this or you read the newsletter, you should be doing this all the time. I talk about this probably almost every week, if not every other week, about you need to always be connecting. I mean, literally, I do say it. I say it at the end of every single one of these episodes, at the end of my newsletter, always be connecting. And that can get exhausting, maybe, if you think you're going to try to do a lot of people in a week, but you're not. You're going to like reach out to people every once in a while, keep a list if you need to, but you're going to just kind of reach out to people and see how they're doing without asking for anything. So make that a habit. Make a quick sort of check-in that says, hey, I thought of you, hadn't talked in a while, was wondering what you were up to. Or, hey, last time that we talked, like 6 months ago, you were working on this project. I was wondering how that went. Or maybe you read an article and when you read it, you think of the person, just send them a note and say, hey, I was reading this. I thought about you because when we worked together, we worked on something similar. I thought I'd pass it along. How are you doing? Those kind of things will go so far because you will make that connection. You're not reaching out when you need something. And also that other person is going to be thinking about you. They may say, hey, I heard of something, an opportunity. Would you be interested? You're going to be top of mind. So you can set a reminder. Again, you can have a list that says, check in with these people at a certain time. That's what I do. I have a networking list with a next contact date. And I just kind of go through that and I reach out to people. And sometimes people pop up on that list. I'm like, I don't really have anything to send them or talk to. And I move it down a month. But have a bit of a habit to just get in touch with people and connect. Not to ask for anything, just to kind of check in. And so then when you do need help, when you do want to ask them to refer you to somebody, it's just going to be like, oh, hey, we've been talking over the last few months. Hey, I was wondering if you could help me out with this. And they're much more likely to not be sitting in that position of feeling like you're just reaching out to them because you need something. They're more than likely to help you. So that's number 1. Don't wait until you need something. Get out there and do it now. All right. Number 2, great networkers don't make it all about themselves. And again, this is what we've all been through. We've sat through conversations, networking conversations, where we've listened to somebody talk all about themselves all the time. when you say like, hey, how are you doing? And then you just have to, wait for your turn to talk. And, it doesn't feel good. So some people think about networking conversations like they have to be pitching themselves, like they have to be constantly telling people like why they should help them or what they need. And, on the other end of that, you're like, wow, you haven't even asked about me. Now, I'm going to explain this because some of you are sitting there saying, Greg, I've followed your advice. I've read your book. I've read the newsletters. I watch your videos, and you always say when you get into a networking conversation, ask the other people about themselves. And I do. That's true. That's number 3 in my networking process is listen and give. And so I always tell you, if you don't know what to talk about in a conversation or networking conversation, then ask the other person about their favorite topic. And their favorite topic is themselves. Ask them about themselves. That's getting the conversation going, but you shouldn't expect to never talk in the conversation, right? You should expect to listen to the other person and then maybe give them some feedback, give them some advice, introduction, recommendations. Remember, give air when you're trying to give stuff, or give attention so that the other person can tell you what they're doing. And at some point, you're going to want that person to maybe show a little interest in you too. So you're going to eventually want this to be a two-way conversation. So if you're sitting in a conversation with somebody and they've been following my advice and they say, hey, tell me what's going on with you. And you start saying, well, I've been working on this project at work and maybe I'm up for a promotion. And then, next time, here's what's going on with me at work, right? Just they'll give you the update. Or, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I could use some advice or help. What you're trying to do is if somebody asks you that, don't just make it all about you and talk the whole time, right? Go move on to be like, yeah, so tell me about you, enough about me, tell you about you. So while I tell people, ask the other person about themselves and listen and give first, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a two-way conversation. So instead of just thinking like, here's what can I ask this other person for, think about what can I give to this person? How can I help them out? Maybe you're introducing them to somebody. It's just flipping it around, right? Again, if somebody asks you about yourself, you don't want to just talk the whole time. You want to reciprocate. You want to be a reflection of this in the conversation and turn around and say, what can I help you with? Or what are you working on? Or tell me what's going on. How can I help you? And then listen and give. So again, the whole point is don't make this about yourself. It's possible to navigate that. I've actually had people say, when I tell them about the listening and giving part, they're like, what if you get two people who just want to listen in the conversation? And it's like, okay, you're going to have to talk some, you're going to have to ask some questions and get the conversation going. So if you get in that situation where you've got two listeners who just want to listen to each other, then ask the other person questions, get them talking, see what's interesting to them. And then, you hope that they'll reciprocate and do the same with you so that you can both share what's going on. But the whole point of this is don't dominate the conversation. Don't be the one who's just talking about yourself the whole time and explaining how great you are. The fact of the matter is, if you're not sure whether you do that or not, you probably do, right? So if you're sitting there being like, well, I don't think I talk about myself all the time. It's one of those things like people who need to hear this aren't listening to this. The people who are out there talking about themselves all the time probably aren't subscribing to this. But if you find yourself dominating the conversation and the other person's not saying much, it's probably time to take a breath, take a break, and step back and ask the other person about themselves. Okay. The third thing that great networks don't do is they don't fake authenticity. And so what I mean by that is when you're reaching out to people in messages or having conversations, and especially when you're doing the initial outreach, right, where you're connecting online, just talk normal. Like, just say it like you would normally say it. Like, sometimes we've gotten you get a message from somebody and maybe maybe you don't, but it's like, hope you're doing well. I would love to connect and see if there's any synergies. Like, who says the word synergies like in a normal conversation outside of work? Nobody uses language like that. So if you're connecting with people via text or email or message, just say it like you're going to say it in person, like they were standing you in front of you, and say like, hey, thought of you, was wondering what was up, would love to catch up sometime, right? Or something to that effect. Or you can maybe like, hey, I saw you posted about this. I really loved your comment about X. It made me think of Y. So, just wanted to share that with you. Looking forward to connecting sometime. I've been doing that recently around some other, like I'll listen to a podcast about HR leadership. It's called an HR Leaders Podcast. And the same host, he'll have different HR leaders and they'll talk about interesting things. And if there's a podcast where I think, wow, that person had a really interesting perspective, I go to their LinkedIn and I don't connect with them right away. I'll do the follow strategy. So again, I've talked about this in my sort of LinkedIn archive or my my LinkedIn playbook. It's like 3 newsletter issues I put all together into one issue. I called it my LinkedIn playbook. And it's sort of the follow and comment strategy, which again, I didn't make up. I've learned this from other people. But the follow and comment strategy is you follow somebody, you comment on their posts so that you become known to them so that they might reach out to you and be like, hey, thanks for coming on my post. Would love to connect. And you can say like, well, why won't you just connect? It's like sometimes people get those connection requests, especially if they've just been on a podcast interview and everybody's like sending them a connection request, like, hey, would love to connect. And they don't know how many people are going to sell them stuff or if they're really going to be a good connection or not. So what I do is if somebody has a great podcast episode or they have a guest article or they wrote a great post, I will start following them. And then I'll go to that post or I'll go to something and I'll start commenting like, hey, I love this. It was great. Looking forward to following the rest of your work. A lot of times they will respond to that comment. And then if we have a discussion in the comments, maybe we'll connect and we'll continue that conversation moving, more to a voice-to-voice conversation. But that's more sort of, I think, personal because you're actually looking at what they're producing and you're thinking about it and you're trying to ask questions and have a conversation, even if it's online. Again, the goal is to get to a voice-to-voice conversation, but think about it as being a person, right? I mean, this is a long game. You're trying to develop relationships here. So don't come out pitching. Don't come out like, hey, how can I help you? Or how can you help me? Just think about, hey, I'm going to connect a little. I'm going to interact. You might connect with somebody that you thought was really good on a podcast, and then you meet them on the phone or in real life, and you're like, "Ooh, wow, that was a mistake, not a connection I want to have." So, give it a little time to kind of see how else they show up, see what else they say, and then move on to a deeper conversation and connection. But don't try to make it seem like you're best friends out of the gate, and just connect and let the relationship kind of grow over time. So don't fake it. Try to be real. Try to be the person that you are in real life. Online, there's too many people who are fake out there, and too many people who are saying things that they don't really believe. So be you and show up like that. You're probably going to have a lot better results. So recap: 3 things. Great networkers don't wait until they need something. They stay in touch. They don't make it all about themselves, and they focus on giving to others. And they don't fake authenticity. They build real relationships. If you're tired of networking, feeling awkward, exhausting, transactional, these little small shifts will help change a lot. And I want to hear from you. What are some of your worst networking experiences you've ever had? Share those stories with me. Drop them in the comments. Send me an email. Would love to hear about it. And if this video helped you, if this episode helped you, if this podcast helped you, if this newsletter edition helped you, don't forget to like it, subscribe, tell your friends about it forward so that more people can hear about this. So go out this week, try out these new strategies, meet some interesting people. Remember, always be connecting.